Hello everyone, welcome to the Crystaly Recapped channel. And now you are going to hear a short review of the movie Exploits of a Young Don Juan. In 1914 in the French countryside, Madame Muller and Roger are traveling in a horse-drawn carriage. During the trip, his eyes are drawn to the lush breasts of an elderly woman and he tries his best to look away. At the entrance to the grand mansion, he is met by his mother and Aunt Marguerite. One of the maids, Ursula, helps him pack his things and asks him if he remembers her after 3 years of separation. The teenager answers that he does. Mr. Frank, a friend of his father's, waves to him from the attic window of the house, and Roger's sister Bertha hugs him warmly. Later, while walking around the property, the siblings meet Madame Muller, who has just finished picking fruit. Her husband walks by, and Bertha greets the elderly man. Suddenly, Madame Muller lifts her dress, which surprises the teenagers. Wandering alone, Roger sees Mr. Muller in the woods, praying in front of a photo of his wife, stuffing his pants with different flowers. Roger runs away, but in his haste he stumbles and falls to the ground. A few seconds later, he hears sounds nearby, goes to the noise and, to his surprise, sees Ursula making love to Adolphe. Seeing that the teenager is peeping, the woman simply laughs and wishes him good morning. At dinner, the teenager looks at Helen, an attractive maid, with interest. Mr. Frank asks the mother about her daughter Eliza's boyfriend, and she explains that he is a lieutenant in the army. After a few minutes, Roger leaves, and when he kisses his aunt goodnight, she refuses a second kiss on the cheek. In the evening, while getting ready for bed, the teenager hears a noise in the hallway. Looking closely, he sees Helen making love to a mysterious man through the open door. He returns to his room and pulls back the sheets and finds Bertha lying on his bed. The girl says she doesn't want to sleep and wants to continue talking to her brother, whom she misses very much. Suddenly, Kate comes in to tell Bertha off for leaving her bed. The girl runs back to her room. The next day, the brother and sister watch from the riverbank as the maids dip their feet in the water. Ursula and Helen ask Madame Muller about her husband, and the elderly woman admits that he still has problems in the bedroom. A moment later, Adolf and Valentine are sitting on the shore joking with the women, and Ursula jokingly shows them the back of her head. Later that day, Lisa's father and sister arrive, and the rest of the family meets them. Inside, Bertha and Roger look at samples of their father's medals. The elderly man laments that business has declined. In the afternoon, when the maids and Adolf are dragging things to the barn, the man sees Roger looking up Ursula's skirt and throws him some hay. Later, Bertha takes her brother with her and they make their way to the place above the confession booth. After his sister leaves, Roger stays and listens to his Aunt Margarita's confession. To his surprise, his aunt confesses that she has had lewd thoughts about Roger. When the teenager takes a step forward, the ceiling collapses and he falls into the priest's booth, shocking his aunt. In the evening, Bertha calms her crying brother and kisses him goodnight. A few minutes later, he hears Helen and the mysterious man making love again. Near the closet, he sees Mr. Frank, who is also watching the maid. Then he meets Ursula, who says she doesn't know who the mysterious lover is either. Roger goes to the attic, where he sees Mr. Franco at the telescope. He finds a book on Mr. Franco's desk and pockets it when he returns. Before he leaves, Roger asks him if he ever felt disappointed as a child, and he replies that he sometimes feels that way now. On the way back, the teenager looks into his parents' bedroom, but Roland catches him and threatens to tell his parents what he has done. Roger tells the boy that he will do whatever he asks. The next day, Roland asks the teenager to wash his car, and soon Elisa joins them. When the officer gets into the car to kiss the woman, Roger puts a bucket of water in front of him, causing him to slip and fall. Later, the teenager hides in a chicken coop and opens a book of Mr. Frank's illustrations and writings for adults. Suddenly, Adolf comes in to spread hay on the ground, and then Helen appears in the window to feed the chickens. The man approaches her and, when she least expects it, closes the window, trapping her in a small hole. She begs Roger to help her, but immediately changes her mind when Adolf begins to make love to her. He returns to the house and replaces Eliza's book with one he borrowed from Mr. Frank. Later, he observes Eliza reading an adult book under a tree, In the kitchen, the teenager catches Ursula by surprise when she takes food out of the oven. The shocked woman smashes a plate over his head in response. Realizing that it is Roger, she tends to his wounds, demonstratively pressing her body against his face. Suddenly, another maid enters the room, interrupting their conversation. Deciding to finally become a man, Roger follows Madame Mueller upstairs to the second floor. She looks out of a small window, and suddenly a teenager enters the room and begins to touch the elderly woman inappropriately. At first, she asks him to stop, but eventually encourages him by lifting her skirt. Their conversation is interrupted by a messenger who informs the workers that Germany has declared war on France. Meanwhile, back at the estate, the wealthy family rejoices at the news of the war, as it means that war medals will soon be in high demand. In the evening, the men who work at the villa try to make the most of the last night and go out on dates with women. Roger tries to join them, but to his disappointment, he finds that everyone has already gone out with a couple. The next day, Berta and her mother watch Elisa say goodbye to Roland. At the same time, the workers accompany the men as they leave the villa in a horse-drawn cart. Later, Ursula asks Roger to help her carry the mattress upstairs. In the bedroom, he begins to court the woman, who is amused by the advances of an inexperienced teenager. Eventually, the woman closes the door, undresses in front of Roger, and they make love. Afterwards, the happy teenager confesses his love to Ursula and asks her to marry him. The woman laughs lightheartedly, realizing that he has just expressed his feelings, because it is his first time with a woman. A few minutes later, Berta sees her brother's torn shirt and realizes that he has just committed a crime. Later, when Kate is combing her hair by the river, Roger appears in the water and surprises her. The teenager admits that he has always found her attractive. He playfully splashes water on the governess, and soon they are engaged in a pleasant activity. A few days later, Lisa is in a hurry to tell her family that Roland was in the newspaper for shooting down the third plane. The adults admire his bravery, and Eliza notices that in the photo her boyfriend is wearing one of her father's medals. The next day, Roger sees that Mr. Frank has just received a package. He follows the man to the attic and sees him looking into a wooden box that allows him to view photos of adults. The teenager asks the man why he doesn't just sleep with real women, and Mr. Frank explains that only men like Roger can do that. In the evening, when Helen was walking down the hall, the teenager called her to his room. He asked the maid who she thought the mysterious man was who was making love to her in the hallway. Ellen replied that it was Mr. Mueller, but the teenager reminds her that Madame Mueller said that her husband could no longer perform in the bedroom. The maid thinks it's because he can only do it with his mistress. As the maid is about to leave, Roger stops her at the door and makes love to her, just as her mystery lover did. The next day, Eliza rides by on a horse, and the teenager follows the woman to the stables. While the woman is cleaning the horse, the teenager begins to touch the woman inappropriately. Elisa tries to stop him, but then they hear Madame Mueller enter the stable. While the elderly woman takes the horse to a nearby stable, Elisa gives up and makes love to Roger. A few days after the teenager and Eliza make love, the woman tells him that she might be pregnant and doesn't know what to do. Suddenly, an airplane flies overhead, and she drags Roger behind a tree so that Roland does not see them. On the way to the house, a cart with workers returning from the war passes by. Suddenly, a crying Madame Mueller passes by, telling them that her husband was killed in the war, and the maids begin to comfort her. In the evening, Ursula comes to Roger's room and tells him that she is going to have a baby. He offers to marry her to Adolf, but she refuses because he is already crippled. Then she decides to marry Valentine, even though he has lost one eye. The teenager asks her to bring him a bottle of red nail polish. Then Margarita comes and tells him that she is also pregnant. Roger proposes that she marry Mr. Frank, whom he considers a good man and clearly in love with her. Soon, Ursula returns with red nail polish, and the teenager takes her with him to Eliza's room. There, he asks the maid to put nail polish on his sister's sheet. Eliza, furious, asks Ursula to stop and takes the bottle of nail polish from her. To calm the women down, Roger asks the maid to wait in his room while he talks to his sister. He asks Eliza to find Roland and tell him that they must make love immediately. Roger goes back to his room to get Margarita and takes her to the attic to see Mr. Frank. On the landing, the teenager overhears Eliza convincing Roland that they can sleep together before the wedding. Roger enters Kate's room to ask if she is pregnant. To his delight, she replies that she is not, which means that he has managed to solve all his problems. This is the end of the movie. That's all for today. Subscribe and like if you want more videos like this.